WZTS LD 16 Hinton, Cozy TV.
Hello, I'm Dr. Paul Conley. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Doc Talk. Tonight I'm here in Beckley, West Virginia with Dr. Lickliter. Dr. Lickliter is a pediatrician who is right here in Beckley, West Virginia. And Dr. Lickliter is going to walk us through something I feel is so important, and that is childhood obesity. As we are seeing our population in this country continue to grow in size, we are seeing adult obesity rates like no other. But it all starts as children. We know that when a child is obese, they usually are also obese as adults. And so Dr. Lickliter is going to talk to us about childhood obesity. We're going to talk about some of the myths about fruit drinks. We're going to also talk about how we can actually have these kids that are quote unquote picky eaters, and how we can actually kind of change that perception, and how we can walk through with these kids, and we can walk through things tonight on how to make sure our kids are healthy, and we can hopefully combat this problem that we're having. So Dr. Lickliter, pediatrician, so tell me, you actually are from Beckley, is that right? You're a local.
Yes, I'm from Beckley, grew up in Beckley. I graduated high school at Oak Hill. I went to college at Marshall, and then I did medical school at the osteopathic school in Lewisburg. And I left West Virginia for a little while. I did my training in Ohio at Akron Children's and stayed there practicing for a while. But I've been wanting to come back for a little while. I have kids and want to be near family, so I'm here.
Well, you know, I tell you what, I'm so glad to have you here. I'm so glad to have you on the show. But I think, you know, it's so important that we get West Virginians like yourself to come back home. And you're right here, positioned right here in Beckley, West Virginia. And, you know, pediatrics is, you know, that's actually what I thought I wanted to do before I did my first pediatric rotation. And then after doing that rotation, you know, it was scary because these little babies, like, you know, that are a month old, that are crying and they can't give you a history. And then I remember doing that LP, that lumbar puncture on that baby. I was like, no, I'm out. So anyway, so I thought I wanted to take care of kids because I love kids. And in saying that, you know, I think, you know, as parents, you know, we do love our kids and we want to take care of our kids. And I think sometimes as parents, you know, we want our kids to be happy. We want, in some ways, to make them happy. But, you know, as kids, they don't have an adult brain and we do. And so they're going to want to eat things that are sugary and sweet and taste good. And, you know, sometimes, you know, I'll see that parent, you know, walking down the aisle of a grocery store and the kid is literally, you know, grabbing things off the shelf and the child is having some of a temper tantrum. And so the parent can either want to say, no, we're not going to have that, or maybe just to appease the child, they give in, and then the child gets something that ultimately is not healthy for them. And so, you know, so tonight we're going to talk about childhood obesity. And, you know, I think about, you know, whenever I was a kid years ago, you know, there was always like that kid in class that was kind of heavy. And there was like one or two, maybe. And now I think about what I see now is like, that's become somewhat of the norm. And that's like what we see. And the skinny kid really is just kind of like what their body weight should be. So maybe you can tell the folks watching, like, what is obesity, childhood obesity, and how do we measure that?
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me, by the way. And yeah, so when you take your baby and your child to the pediatrician for a well visit, one of the first things that happens is the measurements. So we get the weight, the height, the head circumference on the babies, and that all goes into the computer for us to put on the growth chart. So there are these norms, the standard norms, and we plot the growth over time. And that's just compared to, so people ask, like, when I tell them their 50th percentile for their height and weight. What does that really mean? And it's different for boys or girls. So there's a girls chart and a boys chart. And I think of just lining up 100 perfectly healthy kids and all the same age, and you've got them lined up from, shortest to tallest, or lightest to heaviest. And so if you're 50th percentile, your child is right in the middle of all those 100 healthy kids. And so whatever percentile your pediatrician is telling you that your kid is, that's where they are in line of 100 kids their age, smallest to biggest. And so when you think about that, we also do BMI, so the body mass index. We do that on a growth chart just the same way. And so you're talking about 100 kids, all the same age, and you plot that. And so anything really over 85th percentile in the body mass index, that it starts to become something that I look at and something that we talk about. And, if you're just 85th, it's just those early conversations of just small changes. And then as we get to 99th, we're talking a lot more about that. But really, you're just looking at change over time. So is this kid always grown on the top of the chart, or is this a big change for the child? So those are things that we look at and talk about at the well visits. And it's one of the reasons that it's good to bring your kid to a well visit consistently so that we can track that over time.
And I was going to bring that up too, because I think that sometimes, parents think, well, if my kid's not sick, what's the point of these well child checkups? But it is important to make sure that we're hitting certain milestones, benchmarks. Again, I'm not a pediatrician, so if I'm using wrong terms, please
you're
let me know.
doing great.
And we look at where you at on this growth chart. Are you, 50 percentile, 60 percentile? And by all means, when you're hitting that 85, 90 percentile, you have to take a step back, because when we think about childhood obesity, and I guess I failed to mention at the beginning of the program, it's 1 in 5 children in the United States is considered by body mass index, which we calculate, is obese. And so if you think about 1 in 5, that's like 20% of our children, which equates to almost 15 million kids that are out there right now that are suffering from childhood obesity. And I always say things, in life, you can't manage what you don't measure. So coming in to see you as the pediatrician, you can actually be able to take that child, and you have that number that you can manage, and you can look at the parent and say, hey, I'm glad your kid's growing, but our body mass index shows that, we got to be careful here, because we definitely don't want to fall into that obesity category.
Right, and it helps us catch things, because once you get into that category, I look for other things. We might do a screening lipid panel or screen for diabetes at that point, when we might not do that at a routine well visit in a healthy 6-year-old. But we have to think about that as we are getting in those higher percentiles.
So what are some of the things the parent says, but Dr. Lickliter, my kid's just a picky eater, and he or she just won't eat certain things. How do you address that picky eater when the parent brings that up to you?
Absolutely, and that's a big thing in kids, of course. And, just to preface all of this by saying, just for the purpose of this talk, we're talking about like neurotypical, normally developing kids, because, there are certain developmental disorders or health problems that would need a more individualized approach. But for our average healthy child who is a picky eater, one of the first things I talk to parents about is really taking power away from food. So if you make it a huge power struggle every day, every meal, you're turning it into a battle, and it's really difficult, especially at those young ages, to win that battle. The kids don't have a lot of control over a lot of things. They have control over what goes in their mouth, though. And so if you really turn it into a big battle, many times you're going to lose that battle. But when you take the power away from food by saying, it's my job as a parent to offer healthy choices, and it's my kid's job to decide what they're going to eat from the options that I've given them, then you really take this big power struggle away by just you're offering healthy options and they eat what they eat. And so that's some of the advice, and I think it's fine to offer safe food. So I have some patients, many patients, who come to me saying they eat 3 things: chicken nuggets, mac and cheese, pizza. And I say, oh gosh, okay, well that's where we're starting with then. And so at each meal, I think it's fine to offer one of those safe foods, along with every single day offering fruit on their plate, peas on their plate, or a vegetable of any kind on their plate, and really getting that exposure in. And so even if for weeks they see a different fruit and vegetable every single day along with their safe food, and you're just not making comments, you're not bribing, you're not telling them just one bite, or you could have the chicken nuggets after you eat one bite of this. No, you're just offering, you're modeling, so you're eating the food that you want them to be eating. But you're offering this consistently, and they are seeing and smelling and watching you eat a big variety of fruits and vegetables without any pressure. Eventually, they're going to be so much more likely to just take a few bites and get used to the taste and textures of a much bigger variety of things. And you're going to get a lot more ground out of that than making them sit there for 4 hours until they clean their plate. That's, something that we don't want to do.
I think one of the things that, before the show, I was kind of reading on just certain things, and some of it has to go back to family involvement. And I do know that things have changed, since I was a kid. It seems like everything's hustle bustle. Many times you have both parents work, and it's just so much easier to get a pizza, for $5, to run through, like you say, a drive-through, versus actually cooking a meal. So, you pick up the kids from school, you're busy, you got chores, you got whatever you got to do, and it just seems like that that is what I see a lot of things happening, is the fact that it's just easy to get things that are high calorie foods.
Absolutely. The convenience factor is huge, and so I really think about maximizing that time that you have at home. So, there are going to be days where you have to run through the drive-through because you've got, a lot of practice, soccer practice, dance, or whatever it is. But, just really using the time that you do have at home to feed them whole food, eat together as a family, not in front of screens. And then I try, even like with my own kids, if I drive through and get a pizza on our way to practice, that bedtime snack is going to be cut up strawberries and snap peas. And maybe I'm not a fun mom, but my girls know good and well that is what is coming when we get home. If we have fast food for dinner, the bedtime snack is going to be a little bit different. So I think just setting the expectation that it's okay to do that kind of stuff sometimes because life happens, but just the knowledge that the norm for our family is whole food and fruits and vegetables, and you kind of come back to that even after periods of crazy times where you kind of stray from what you feel like is your family value around food. I think you find your way back to that if you make it normal for you.
Well, we're getting ready to come up to commercial break. There's a few things, you talked about sleep, and I just did a doc talk with Dr. Heather Claudius, and we talked about how sleep regulates as far as like metabolism and obesity. As you see, we got some different things we want to talk over. I want you to kind of walk through these, because sometimes when you look, it says good to grow, 100% juice, no sugar added. You're going to be surprised when she tells you really how good this is not. And we're going to talk just a little bit about some of the things that for some individuals, how we may even have some medical things that have been FDA approved to also help combat childhood obesity, because we know that 80% of children that are obese as a child will become obese as adults. So I'm Dr. Paul Conley. We're going to take a commercial break. We're going to be right back here with Dr. Lickliter, so stay tuned.
You're watching Doc Talk with Dr. Paul Conley on WZTS 16 Cozy TV. Stay with us. We'll be right back after these messages.
Vandalia Health is proud to be a West Virginia-owned healthcare system, bringing together the hospitals and providers of CAMC, Mon, and Davis. We are dedicated to enhancing the health of our communities through clinical excellence. Our compassion and commitment remain the same with people you know and trust to care for you and your families. With more specialists, hospitals, and outpatient locations, we are delivering expertise and state-of-the-art care. Vandalia Health, expert care close to home.
Welcome back. Doc Talk with Dr. Paul Conley continues on WZTS 16 Cozy TV.
Hello, I'm Dr. Paul Conley. Thanks for coming back to Doc Talk. I'm here with Dr. Lickliter. Dr. Jackie Lickliter is a pediatrician here in Beckley, West Virginia, and we've been talking about childhood obesity. And so, yeah, Dr. Lickliter, we talked a little bit about body mass index. We talked about making sure you keep those appointments with your pediatrician. You want to see the pediatrician to make sure you know your child's body mass index. I think that's important for parents to know. They should know where your child is in the growth chart. And the only way to know that is to see your pediatrician like Dr. Lickliter. So we've been talking about some of the different pleasure foods and trying to make sure that the child has some involvement in what they pick and choose to eat, but ultimately it's the parent's job to make sure that they're making, good, healthy choices. So, at the break, we were just talking, I was talking about, hey, I just ran out, by the way, to pick out some different things to talk about on the show. And so it looked like I thought, well, this obviously is probably not so good because it says Skittles original. And I thought, well, this is probably bad. And I thought, but this can't be bad because it has Thomas the train here, and it says good to grow. I thought, well, if it's good to grow, it says 100% juice, and it's apple, and then it says no sugar added. But then Dr. Lickliter looked at the back and says, oh, and so she says, not so fast. So tell us about, as an adult, picking out, drinks for your kids. I know we're getting ready to go on a trip. And you got to make sure they have some juice or something to drink, to tide them over. Maybe you want some snacks. Maybe you give them some donuts. You got a Reese cup, gummy bears, bag of chips. So tell me about no sugar and tell me about some of the things we have here on the table. Maybe other than the water, nothing here is really so hot, right?
Yeah, I'm the most boring mom alive because this is the only thing on this table that's on my list to bring on a road trip. I just think of, and I'm not too strict, truly, but in my house, and my recommendation for all my patients is at the house, no reason to keep any beverage in your house except plain water, or black coffee for the grown-ups only. But my recommendation is no sugary beverages in the house. There's just no need for that. It's so many empty calories, even when it's something that looks like a health food, so good to grow. I think parents, especially parents of picky eaters, they feel like I'm getting fruit in my child at this point. The problem is this is fruit that has been most of the health properties taken out of it. And so what we're left with is just sugar water that truly has a little bit more. If you, this is only 6 ounces and this is 14 ounces. And so you have to kind of do the math, but this actually has a little bit more sugar than this Skittles drink that I didn't even know existed. It's so gross. But so really. Obviously
I did.
Yeah. So
shame on me.
Anyways, this has more sugar per ounce than the Skittles drink. Now this Pacific
because it said
Punch
juice,
energy juice.
I knew that if it said juice, Dr. Lickliter, again, it had to be healthy, right? Because the juice is big and red right on the front, right?
Yep. And so our first ingredients on here: carbonated water, then sugar, then glucose, another word for sugar. So 2 different sugars there before we get to the juice. And then we've got some orange juice and apple juice in here, but this has the most sugar of all of any of these choices. And so the good thing about fruit is that you get sugar. If you eat an apple, there is absolutely sugar in there. I'm not arguing that. But it has so much fiber and actual nutrients that it really, your body doesn't process the sugar in the same way that it processes the sugar from this. And so you really can't even compare those two things in terms of nutrition. And then, of course, we were speaking just like on the break about serving size. Like when I was a kid, an individual bag of chips was half this size, and now when you go to the gas station, you get this bag. So there's actually 2.5 servings in this one bag that I feel like is sold as a, sold really as a single serving. And so it's just changed a lot. There's a lot of calories. So per package, this has 400 calories. And so anyways, I think that those little things add up so much. And so, like I said, I think at a birthday party, you're out with friends, that is not the time I limit. I say, yes, of course, get what your friends are getting, because I know that 90% of the time we're making good choices at home. We've got, fruits and vegetables and all the good stuff at home. And then I don't go crazy over limiting when we're in a social setting or it's a birthday party. That's when you can feel comfortable because you're confident. You know that your kids make healthy choices other times, and then they're free to have something when it's a special occasion, if that makes sense.
Well, I was just thinking about when we were talking about the break about, this talks about, has apple written all over it, okay, apple, but really there's no apple in this. I mean, it's just some juice. But from a gastrointestinal standpoint, we know that the fiber that you get, with fruits and with vegetables also help as prebiotics for the GI tract, which affects your metabolism. And we know that when the gastrointestinal tract and all the microbiome is just being fed things like this, it actually alters your metabolism. And we see by the things we eat, and we see that in the Western world. So one of the things about when you take someone from a third world country or maybe even from Europe, the way they eat versus the way we eat, that in itself changes our microbiome. And by doing that, it changes our metabolism. We talk about, in my world, we talk about fatty liver disease, and you're seeing that as a pediatrician. Absolutely. You're seeing fatty liver, elevated lipids, and you're seeing not so much type 1 diabetes, you're seeing type 2 diabetes. And so when we talk about, losing weight, we did an episode, Dr. Burdett, recently about, if you can cut out 500 calories per day, 7 days a week, that's 3,500 calories, that's 1 pound. Well, right here, if you carve out this one bag of chips, you're almost 500 calories from this. And one of our production guys called this a small bag of chips. He goes, oh yeah, it's a little bag of chips because I can't stop. Because one serving size is 15 potato chips. And our production guy said, well, I can't stop at 15. So you're going to eat 400 calories. Easily. And you're going to do this and not even count that. Because I think what happens is when you start asking people how much they ate, and they said, well, I had a sandwich. Well, but what about the 400 calories in the bag? Oh, but that was a small
meals.
bag.
That wasn't even, yes. So you're not even counting that. You're right.
So I think that, you have to sort of think about everything goes in your mouth. And again, to Dr. Lickliter's point is that even though it says no sugar added, but these sugary drinks are these empty calories. And when you start talking about calories and calories, that's where we start seeing this obesity. So one of the things I want to talk a bit about, it does seem like that physical activity is not what it once was. We have so many other ways to entertain, whether it be, I call it doom scrolling on your phone. I do see, even in my waiting room, where there will be an adult seeing me, the child is usually on their iPad to basically entertain them. And then I think we talk a little bit about the screen time and sleep time. So maybe some other things that maybe you can talk to us a little bit about as a pediatrician. Yeah, I understand that all this is bad other than the water, but physical activity, what's your recommendations with that? What's your recommendation with screen time, sleep time? All those things we know have some effect with their metabolism and also have effect with childhood obesity.
Absolutely. So screen time, I think when I think about screen time and the troubles with screen time as linked to obesity, a couple of different things. Certainly with decreasing the amount of exercise that kids are getting, because like you said, you're entertained. You're sitting there, you're not playing outside like we used to when we were kids. So that is something. And the official recommendation exercise-wise is for kids is an hour a day of moderate exercise. And I really think we live in one of the most beautiful places in the world. It should be so easy to get kids outside here, but it can be difficult. And that's another thing that I think if you can make some small changes as a whole family, it's a lot more sustainable. So even just something small like going outside on a walk after dinner, you can start so small like that. And then once you're out there, it feels good, and you could, you might even do more than what you planned on doing. The other thing, though, that I think about with screens is making sure that we're sitting down as a family at a dinner table away from screens to eat, because sometimes, you get on a screen and you have food sitting there and you just eat and eat and eat, and your body really isn't even processing the fact that you're eating a lot, that you're full, you're not even hungry, but it's like you're connecting it to this like boredom and the dopamine, you're just like getting hit after hit. You're scrolling, you're eating, and
so this is going on as you're just sitting
you're
there,
just sitting there, and you don't even
TikToking
realize what you're taking in, especially as a kid. So you could really overdo it without realizing it at all. And so just eating together as a family, promoting conversation, paying attention to what you're eating, that you're liking it and it's good, and then you feel full after that and satisfied. So I think, and then sleep, like you mentioned, sleep as far as the importance of that for your overall metabolism, but also for your mood and to not need those dopamine hits during the day to keep you going. And so my recommendation about the screens and sleep is that in our pediatric population, no need to have screens in the bedroom at all. And that makes me very unpopular with some of my teenage patients when I recommend that the phone be charged in the living room or kitchen overnight and not go in the bedroom at all. And that really is, it really matters to sleep, to be off of the screens 30 minutes or so before you're wanting to fall asleep. It makes a big difference.
We just talked about all this. So it's not just in the pediatric world. Dr. Claw just talked about no TV in the bedroom. It definitely affects your sleep-wake cycle, affects your cortisol levels, and it definitely increases obesity. We got a couple minutes left. So I ran out to the store because our production guy said he wanted a zero sugar / diet drink. And you said that's a pet peeve, because just because it says diet and just because it says sugar-free, zero sugar, what are your thoughts on that and the brain, and as far as like consuming more food, more calories? Tell me about that.
Absolutely. So it is, I always harp on water, and people tell me a lot, yeah, they drink the zero sugar flavored water. And while I love that they're drinking water, I would want it to be plain water. What happens is when you get fake sugar, which is what is in anything that tastes good and says no sugar, what happens is you drink that and your body, your taste buds in your mouth register sugar. So it says, okay, so this is sweet, we've got sugar coming. And so that sends signals to your brain that we're going to be processing sugar. That sends out the hormones that help break down sugar, and then nothing comes. And so we've got this feedback loop that said, wait a second, we sent out this and you said sugar was coming and it never came. So the feedback loop tells your brain then, we thought we were going to have sugar and we didn't get any. We need some. We need more. Now I'm hungry.
So you eat more.
So it makes you hungry. It makes you eat more. It makes you more likely to crave something sweet, or just eat more than you would have if you weren't drinking the sugar-free beverage with it. So again, the most boring pediatrician ever, but plain water is what my recommendation is.
So we got 15 seconds, and the take-home point is the sugar-free production manager is not so good for you, because when you drink that, you're still hungry and you're going to go out and you're going to eat a Big Mac to replace the sugar that you didn't get, and you're going to get more calories. So,
Yep.
Dr. Lickliter, pediatrician right here in Beckley, West Virginia. It's been a pleasure having you on the show. We've been
Thanks
talking
so
about
much.
childhood obesity. I'm Dr. Paul Conley, and you've been watching Doc Talk. Until next time, have a good night.